That is the reality of war. We are going to talk about that today and the type of men it takes to endure the monotony and misery of war. Smash that like button and subscribe, and we'll get to it right after. Welcome and good morning to my 1,777 subscribers. We are moving upward and onward to enlighten, inspire, and build up humanity. One person at a time, one of you at a time. And sometimes when you think about humanity, it can be pretty horrific. But one of the reasons you people, and myself included, in the West have such a comfortable, pleasurable, soft life is because men and some women have done some horrible things to protect us from tyranny, from oppression, from outside invaders. I know a lot of people don't like Tate. They think he's misogynistic, he's a woman hater, he's this, he's that. Well, he's very much like most of the men I grew up with. And maybe some of you are thinking that, well, thank God we've outgrown that stage. And I understand that, because if you've never known any different, you would look at these men as horrible, women-hating, misogynistic, crude people. But these men that now people call toxic are the ones that fought and died for women and children. Yeah, you would get a bunch of men together in my day when I was a kid, and they would talk about women and make jokes about women, crude jokes about women, but they loved their women. And guess what? Women would talk about men back then too and make jokes about how men are. And they do it still today. But everyone was not so easily offended back then. People realized that when it came right down to it, these men would give their life for the honor of a woman, to protect a woman, to protect their family and their children and their nation. And that's something we seem to have forgotten nowadays. So any man who seems a little crude is considered misogynistic. And most people don't even know what that word means. What it means is a prejudice and a hatred toward women. Look up the definition. I know a lot of people say Tate hates women. He's misogynistic. No, they say he's misogynistic, not really knowing what the word means. And I'll guarantee you, if you met Tate out on the street with one of his girlfriends or two of his girlfriends, and you got up in her face, he would be in your face, stopping you and protecting her from you. Now, a man who hates women would just keep walking. He wouldn't care what happened to her. And it takes men like Tate to fight and die in wars. Those are the kind of men that have to do and are able to do what needs to be done so you and I can sit at home and be safe in our homes without bars on the windows and steel metal doors like they have in many third world countries where I have lived. And you just don't understand that unless you've been there. So I have a couple of stories, or maybe a few, from war. What is war really like? And what kind of men does it take to fight in these wars? So let's see what we have to say here. Walter Moore, Tank Battalion Officer, 1st Marine Division, took part in the invasion at Okinawa. That's where my father was stationed, at Okinawa. The Japanese Army had these spider traps with about 50 pounds of picric acid filler. It's kind of a classic sight you didn't want to see at the time. They'd have a white bandana with the Japanese flag, a bunch of hieroglyphics. They'd have this 50 pounds on their back and literally stagger with it because they're little guys. Come pop up out of a hole and go right to the suspension system on the tank and stick their head in and blow themselves up. And you know what was horrifying about this, if I may say so, is that it didn't rain much. When it was real dry, you would see chunks on the tank armor that looked like wet mud. And you'd go over and scratch it, and it would be human flesh. They'd literally blow themselves up. Think about that. What kind of a man can endure things like that day in and day out for years at a time? He's got to be a hard, tough man. A man that nowadays people call misogynistic. A man that they say needs to be vulnerable and show his feelings. Did that man have time to show his feelings there? Did he have time to sit down and cry about the horrors he's seen? No, he didn't. These are the kind of men that give you this safe home that you live in here in the West. What do you think about our government? Our presidents? How many decisions have they made during their term that has cost the lives of innocent men, women, and children? Do you guys ever think about that? Would you want their job? It's easy to sit back and badmouth the presidents. Could you live with the decisions they have to make during their term? I know I couldn't. And I don't agree with the president we have in office now. He's not my pick. But if he's your pick, that's fine. I'm not going to sit here and complain about, well, I could. I don't understand some of the things he does, but I won't complain about him. Okay, so, and I know who I wanted to be president. Maybe you wouldn't have liked him. So, but that's the way it is. But we don't have to hate each other because we have a different choice of politics. But my point today is this. You want to call Tate a misogynistic, crude hater, or whatever you want to call him? If it wasn't for men like him, we would be speaking German. World War II, we would have lost the war. With the feminine men we had today, you think technology is going to stop ground troops? No. If we ever had a ground invasion, you better be damn glad that we have men with guns out here. They grew up in my time that aren't afraid to do what needs to be done to protect you and your family. Very important. Sure, I would like to live in a world that was full of love and we all just loved each other, but it isn't quite like that yet. Give us another 10 or 20,000 years, maybe we'll get there. Dangers in the air. Harry George, B-29 co-pilot, survived fighter plane attacks. When the flak stopped, then the fighter planes would come in and try to ram you. You've probably heard of this thing called a Baka bomb. It's a suicide Japanese rocket plane. We first heard them described as an orange ball of fire. They had strapped his Baka bomb, his rocket plane, under a twin-engine Betty bomber, and they'd go over the target where there's a lot of B-29 streaming over the target. Then they'd release down. He'd have about 10 minutes of fuel and an arming lever on the front of it, and he's the only one in it, no landing gear. He was told to go ahead and ram a B-29, and they did that several times. Matter of fact, the 25th of May mission that we had, I looked out to the right and I could see another 29. A friend of mine, it seemed like the Baka bomb came down right from behind him and just hit the plane in about the center, and the whole thing blew up at that time. So it's quite a fearsome sight. Yeah, my dad talked about that. He was on a ship over in Japan, in the waters over there, and that's what he was concerned about was the kamikaze pilots. They would set off the shores over there and shoot the big guns. They would be miles off the shore and shoot the big guns at the beach line, at the land. That's what men like that did. My dad didn't sit around and cry and piss and moan about this and about that, about the horrors he's seen in war. He wasn't sitting around trying to think about how vulnerable he could be. They didn't talk much about things like that, but they did what had to be done to protect you and me, to give us a future here. And what's the old saying? Hard times make strong men make good times make weak men. We're in a position or a time of weak men. So when you get somebody like Tate that comes out here talking about men needing to man up, everybody wants to hate on him. I don't know whether he's innocent or guilty in what he did, but I know this. Many of the leaders of World War II said if we had lost the war, they would have been tried for war crimes. But they turned out to be heroes. General MacArthur, Patton, many of the great leaders did terrible things. Many soldiers did terrible things, and they were considered heroes because we won. Too many people don't realize what men do in war. I was fortunate enough to miss it. I had a couple friends that came back from Vietnam. It messed them up for the rest of their lives, and they told me some horrible stories. Do you know women, children get raped and killed, cut up? Yeah, those things happen. You become very animalistic when you're in war. When you have kids coming up with bombs, trying to kill you, trying to shoot you, and you have to kill them. This is the reality of war. What kind of a man do you think it takes to eliminate these threats? A man that most people call a toxic masculine man. But as I said, we need men like this. We are not so far advanced that we live in a world of just love. Someday I hope we'll get there, and I believe we will if we don't destroy ourselves on the way. So remember, when you want to badmouth somebody like this, someone who talks like that, you may be in desperate need of a man like that should you get yourself in a bind and someone is trying to hurt you or kill you. It's a different way to look at things. Take care. Have a great day.